February 26th, 1945. The war in the Pacific has reached a new, brutal calculus. From the Marianas, B-29 superfortresses are striking the Japanese homeland, but they are flying wounded, crippled, and dying. Without fighter escorts for the full duration, their losses are catastrophic. To win the air war, to bring Japan to its knees, America needs a staging ground, an unsinkable aircraft carrier parked 750 miles off the coast of Tokyo. They need Iwo Jima, and as dawn breaks over the island's black volcanic beaches, that massive strategic imperative falls onto the shoulders of men like Private Wilson Watson. He grips the 20-pound Browning automatic rifle, the gun every Marine dreaded carrying. Too heavy, too clunky, too slow for the lightning-fast, close-quarters combat of the Pacific theater. This wasn't just opinion, it was doctrine. Military doctrine, born from the static trenches of Europe, said automatic weapons belonged on fixed positions, providing overwatch, not in the hands of advancing infantry. The Japanese, masters of asymmetric warfare, had built their entire defense around this assumption. Lightweight machine guns, quick movements, and hit-and-run tactics designed to overwhelm any Marine foolish enough to lug a full auto rifle across open ground. But as Watson's boots hit the sulfur-stained sand, something the enemy never anticipated was about to unfold. In 15 minutes on a blood-soaked hilltop, this too-heavy gun would prove that everything the military thought it knew about automatic weapons was dead wrong. 1 Marine, 60 enemy troops. A weapon that wasn't supposed to work. The Japanese had no idea what was coming. It was a weapon from another era. A relic of a different war. The Browning automatic rifle, birthed in 1918, from the mind of John Moses Browning, a titan of American industry, was a mechanical marvel designed for a European battlefield that vanished before it could prove itself. Now, 27 years later, as the 3rd Marine Division prepared for the bloodiest battle in Marine Corps history, that same weapon sat heavy in the hands of men who questioned whether it belonged on a modern battlefield at all. Private Wilson Watson had carried the BAR for 8 months, from Paris Island to Camp Pendleton, and every step had reinforced what every Marine knew. The gun was a burden. At 20 pounds, fully loaded, it weighed twice as much as the standard M1 Garand, while Japanese troops, products of a resource-starved empire, moved with lightweight Nambu machine guns and Type 99 rifles. American riflemen, the beneficiaries of the world's greatest industrial engine, struggled under the weight of a weapon that seemed to prioritize firepower over the man. The technical specifications told only part of the story. The BAR fired the same powerful 30-06 cartridge as the Garand, but at a cyclic rate of 500 to 650 rounds per minute. Its effective range stretched to 600 yards. Impressive on paper, but the 20-round magazine emptied in less than 2 seconds of sustained fire. Reload time under combat conditions averaged 8 to 12 seconds, an eternity. The weapon's bipod legs, designed for stability, caught on everything. Most Marines removed them. Watson, born in rural Alabama, understood machinery. His father had taught him to hunt with a Springfield bolt action, emphasizing patience and shot placement. The BAR represented everything his upbringing had taught him to avoid: waste, imprecision, reliance on machinery over skill. Yet here he was, crouched in the pre-dawn darkness, watching the silhouette of Iwo Jima grow larger. This was not a conventional fight. This was an extermination, engineered by one man, General Tadamichi Kuribayashi. He had studied American amphibious tactics and concluded that traditional banzai charges were suicide against superior American firepower. His 21,000 defenders would not meet them at the beach. They would fight from an underground maze of 11 miles of interconnected tunnels, bunkers, and firing positions. Every hill, every ravine, every apparent piece of open ground had been pre-sighted for artillery and mortar fire. This was defense in depth, taken to its geological conclusion. The island itself was the weapon. The tactical problem was unprecedented. Previous Pacific battles had been won through rapid advances supported by naval gunfire. Iwo Jima's defenders were buried too deep for naval shells to reach them. Victory would require infantry, clearing positions with grenades, flamethrowers, and direct assault. Watson understood that his weapon's reputation for poor performance stemmed from this doctrinal misuse. Military planners had envisioned the BAR as a squad support weapon, operated from fixed positions, a concept borrowed from European warfare. The Pacific theater demanded different thinking. As their landing craft approached, Watson checked his ammunition. 1,220-round magazines, 240 rounds total. The weight of the ammo alone approached 15 pounds. This was the paradox of American industrial might. A soldier weighed down by his own overwhelming firepower. The beach ahead looked deceptively quiet. Naval bombardment had turned the black sand into a moonscape, but no enemy fire greeted the first waves. Kuribayashi's strategy called for allowing the Marines to land in strength before triggering the defensive response. Somewhere in the hills, Japanese observers were counting boats. The real battle would begin when the Marines moved inland. Watson's squad leader, Sergeant McMahon, had studied aerial photographs of their objective. Hill 203. Its slopes honeycombed with caves and bunkers. Every hilltop was a fortress designed to channel American attacks into prepared killing zones. The contradiction between doctrine and reality was clear. Squad tactics called for the BAR man to establish a base of fire, but the terrain rarely offered clear fields of fire. Combat occurred at ranges measured in yards, not hundreds. Watson had begun to suspect that his weapon's supposed weaknesses might be its advantages. The BAR's weight provided stability for rapid fire without the bipod. Its powerful cartridge retained effectiveness at close range. Most importantly, its automatic fire could deliver overwhelming firepower during the brief, violent moments when Japanese defenders exposed themselves. As the landing craft's bow gate dropped and Watson stepped into the surf, he carried more than a controversial weapon. He bore the weight of tactical assumptions that had governed American infantry doctrine since the First World War. Within hours, those assumptions would face their ultimate test. The too-heavy gun was about to prove that the most criticized tools become the most decisive when wielded by someone who understands their true potential. The deception lasted exactly 47 minutes. Watson's boots had barely dried from the surf when the first mortar rounds began falling. Walking methodically across the black sand, the enemy had waited with disciplined, predatory patience, allowing 4,000 Americans to bunch up on the narrow beachhead before revealing the killing field they had prepared. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was a methodical, industrial-scale destruction of men caught in an invisible web of interlocking fire. Watson's platoon had advanced 300 yards inland when the hillsides erupted. This was not a charge. It was a calibrated ambush. Japanese positions that aerial reconnaissance had missed or dismissed as destroyed revealed themselves through curtains of fire that swept the volcanic terrain like deadly rain. The Marines had walked into a trap designed by an enemy who understood their tactics better than they understood themselves. Every piece of cover the Americans sought had been pre-registered for mortar fire. Every route of advance channeled them toward machine gun positions, hidden in spider holes and concrete bunkers that naval bombardment could not reach. The sound was a symphony of industrial death, unlike anything Watson had experienced in training. Japanese machine guns chattered with a distinctive, high-speed rhythm, different from the slower, heavier beat of American weapons. The Nambu Type 92 fired 7.7 millimeters rounds at 450 rounds per minute, creating a sustained, terrifying buzz that mixed with the sharp crack of Arisaka rifles and the deeper, gut-punching thump of mortars. But it was the silence between bursts that proved most terrifying moments, when Marines realized that movement meant instant death, and stillness meant eventual death from indirect fire. Sergeant McMahon's voice cut through the chaos, directing his squad toward a depression in the volcanic rock that offered momentary shelter. Watson followed, the BAR's 20-pound weight shifting awkwardly as he scrambled across terrain that seemed designed to punish anyone carrying more than basic equipment. Around him, Marines with lighter M1 Garans moved more quickly, diving for cover that often proved illusory as enemy fire stitched the ground from 3 directions at once. The Japanese had positioned their weapons to create perfect, overlapping crossfires that eliminated dead space and forced attackers into increasingly desperate situations. The tactical problem, the failure of American doctrine, became clear within minutes. Traditional squad tactics relied on establishing a base of fire to suppress enemy positions, while other elements maneuvered for assault. But the enemy remained invisible. How do you suppress a ghost? The Japanese fired from positions that could not be identified until their muzzle flashes gave them away. And by then, it was too late. When Marines attempted to return fire, they exposed themselves to hidden observers who directed mortar fire with lethal, immediate precision. The result was a deadly game of hide-and-seek where the Japanese held every advantage. Watson's first engagement lasted less than 30 seconds, but it taught him everything he needed to know about his weapon's potential and its doctrinal failings. A Japanese machine gun position opened fire from a cave mouth approximately 60 yards to his front, its tracers seeking targets among the scattered Marines. Following doctrine, Watson deployed the BAR's bipod and attempted to return precise, suppressive fire from a prone position. The weapon's accuracy was excellent, but his position immediately drew attention from enemy mortars. 3 rounds landed within 20 yards, the concussion lifting him off the ground, forcing him to abandon his carefully prepared firing position and seek new cover. The lesson was immediate and brutal. The BAR's conventional role as a squad support weapon was not only ineffective, it was suicidal. It turned the operator into a static, 20-pound target for an enemy who had months to register every square inch of the battlefield. Watson realized that his weapon's supposed disadvantages, its weight, its requirement for close-range engagement, its profligate ammunition consumption, were actually adaptations to a different kind of warfare. Crouched 10 yards to Watson's left, Sergeant McMahon had exhausted 2 8-round clips from his Garand trying to locate the machine gun. His accurate rifle fire, devastating at longer ranges, proved inadequate against an enemy who appeared for a 2-second burst before disappearing into prepared positions. The foundation of Marine training, marksmanship, became irrelevant when targets appeared for seconds at a time. The breakthrough came when Watson abandoned doctrinal thinking. He stopped treating the BAR like a machine gun and started treating it like an assault rifle. When the Japanese machine gun resumed firing, Watson left his covered position and began moving directly toward the enemy. He didn't drop. He advanced. The BAR's 20-pound weight, previously a hindrance, now provided stability, absorbing recoil and allowing for accurate fire, while advancing a tactic known as walking fire, which the weapon was designed for but which Doctrine had forgotten. Its automatic capability allowed him to maintain suppressive fire without the pause required for bolt manipulation. The Japanese crew, trained to engage targets at longer ranges, found themselves facing sustained automatic fire from an opponent who was closing the distance. Their tactical doctrine had not anticipated an enemy who would advance directly into their field of fire while maintaining effective return fire. When Watson reached effective range, approximately 20 yards from the cave mouth, he emptied an entire 20-round magazine into the position in one sustained, deafening burst. The psychological impact on nearby Marines was immediate. They had witnessed one man with an obsolete weapon neutralize a position that had pinned down an entire squad. More importantly, they had seen a tactical approach that matched the reality of Pacific combat. The BAR, dismissed as too cumbersome, had proven decisive when employed with shocking, close-range aggression. But this success came at a cost that illustrated the weapon's fundamental challenge. His 20-round magazine, emptied in one engagement, represented more than 8% of his total ammunition load. Automatic fire demanded a different calculation, trading ammunition efficiency for tactical speed and overwhelming psychological effect. The platoon's advance resumed, but the landscape had changed. Marines who had previously sought long-range firing positions now moved aggressively toward the enemy. Watson's demonstration had revealed that Japanese defensive tactics were vulnerable. The key was abandoning the conventional wisdom that automatic weapons required fixed positions. As the platoon approached the base of Hill 203, Watson counted his remaining ammunition: 10 magazines, 200 rounds. The mathematics of automatic fire were unforgiving. He had perhaps 10 more engagements before becoming just another rifleman, but he had learned something that would prove more valuable than ammunition. The Japanese had prepared for a conventional assault, not for a Marine who understood his weapon's true, brutal potential. The mortar round that changed everything landed 23 yards behind Watson's position at 11:47 on the morning of February 27th. This was not a lucky shot. This was a calculated, registered strike. The Japanese observers on the high ground had waited patiently for the platoon to advance into this pre-designated kill box. The explosion killed Corporal Henderson instantly and wounded 2 other Marines badly enough to remove them from the fight. But its most critical impact was strategic. The shrapnel severed the communication wire that connected Watson's platoon to battalion headquarters. In that instant, 32 Marines were erased from the larger battle plan. An isolated contingent on a hilltop that Japanese artillery had already registered for destruction. Watson found himself alone, not by choice, but by the brutal mathematics of a well-laid trap. The mortar barrage that followed Henderson's death was not an assault. It was an execution. It scattered his squad across 100 yards of broken terrain, each Marine atomized, seeking whatever individual shelter the volcanic rock could provide. When the shelling stopped, an eerie, sulfur-tinged quiet settled over the hill. It was the kind of silence that precedes either retreat or annihilation. Through the acrid air, Watson could see them. Japanese infantry, moving like ghosts, through positions that should have been cleared hours earlier. They were reoccupying bunkers and spider holes, connecting back to the vast tunnel system that honeycombed the island's interior. The tactical situation was worse than desperate. Watson's platoon had been drawn forward by what they believed was a breakthrough. Instead, they had walked into Kuribayashi's masterpiece. The enemy had allowed them to take the hill's crest, then sealed off their retreat routes with coordinated fire from positions that had remained hidden. Now, those same positions were revealing themselves, confident that the isolated Marines posed no significant threat. Watson counted 7 distinct enemy positions within his field of view, each one carefully sighted to provide mutual support. This was the Japanese doctrine of interlocking fields of fire, a defensive web that eliminated dead space and forced attackers into prepared killing zones. And it was all connected. Tunnels allowed defenders to reinforce threatened points or withdraw under direct assault, only to reappear elsewhere. Traditional Marine tactics, identify, suppress, destroy, were useless against an enemy who could disappear and re-emerge at will. The first Japanese soldiers to approach Watson's position moved with the chilling confidence of men who believed they faced a defeated, demoralized enemy. A squad of 8 soldiers emerged from a tunnel entrance 40 yards down the slope. Their Type 99 rifles held at the ready, but not with the urgency that real combat demanded. This was a mopping-up operation. What they encountered instead was a Marine who had spent 2 days unlearning a lifetime of doctrine. Watson's opening burst caught the Japanese squad completely exposed. The bar's heavy thump, thump, thump of 30-0, 6 rounds, a sound of overwhelming power, swept across their formation like a scythe. 8 enemy soldiers fell in less than 5 seconds, their bodies scattered across terrain that moments before had seemed secure. But Watson understood this was not a victory. It was an announcement. He had just told the entire hill exactly where he was and what he was. The Japanese had not committed a single squad to retaking the hilltop. They had committed an entire company, more than 120 soldiers who could afford to accept casualties that would destroy a smaller force. The psychological impact of Watson's fire was as important as its physical effects. Japanese soldiers, moving confidently toward a routine cleanup, suddenly found themselves under sustained, mobile automatic fire from an enemy who should have been suppressed. Their tactical doctrine had not prepared them for a single Marine who could maintain effective fire while constantly changing position. Watson's next engagement occurred less than 2 minutes later. A second squad, learning from the first, attempted to flank his position from the north. This time, the enemy approached with greater caution, using volcanic outcroppings for cover and advancing by bounds. Their tactics were sound by conventional standards, but they were still playing by a rulebook Watson had just thrown away. He waited until the lead elements were committed. Then he left his cover and moved directly toward them, firing sustained bursts. The key to Watson's success, the tactical innovation born of pure desperation, lay in his abandonment of static defensive thinking. He was not trying to hold a position. He treated the entire hilltop as a mobile battlefield. The BAR's weight, that crippling liability, now provided the stability necessary for walking fire. He had integrated movement and firepower into a single, fluid concept of aggression. Japanese return fire intensified as more enemy soldiers realized they faced a significant threat, not isolated survivors. Rifle rounds and grenade fragments chipped volcanic rock around Watson. But the enemy's response revealed a critical weakness. They were attempting to engage a mobile target using techniques designed for static warfare. Their positions, while mutually supporting against a conventional assault, became liabilities when facing an opponent who refused to remain in one location long enough to be targeted. The ammunition consumption was enormous. In the first 10 minutes, Watson had expended 4 20-round magazines, 80 rounds, nearly a third of his total load. By conventional standards, it was an irresponsible waste. But those calculations ignored the tactical value of sustained automatic fire. Each burst not only engaged visible targets but forced others to seek cover, disrupted their coordination, and created opportunities that would have been impossible under the precise, conservative fire of a rifle. The turning point was not a conscious decision, but an instinctual realization. Watson understood that the Japanese defensive positions, so brilliant at repelling a conventional, cautious assault, were actually brittle and vulnerable to a close-range, overwhelming, and unthinking attack. The cave mouths and tunnel entrances that provided excellent protection against distant rifle fire or mortar fragments became death traps when approached by an enemy wielding a mobile automatic weapon. The BAR was not just a gun, it was a psychological sledgehammer. The 30-06 cartridge, a round designed to stop a deer at 500 yards, was now being unleashed at 20. When that much energy entered a confined space, like a bunker or a tunnel, it didn't just kill, it annihilated. The round retained lethal effectiveness, even after ricocheting off volcanic rock, creating a cone of deadly, unpredictable fragments that reached deep into positions where direct fire could not penetrate. Watson's assault on the central bunker complex began at 12:05 and lasted exactly 4 minutes. This was not a maneuver. This was a rejection of maneuver. It was a 15-minute sprint into the heart of the enemy's system, moving from position to position while maintaining continuous fire. He advanced across 60 yards of open ground that, according to every tactical manual, should have been impassable. His success depended not on superior marksmanship, but on his understanding that the BAR was fundamentally different from every other weapon on the battlefield. It was not a rifle that happened to fire automatically. It was an automatic weapon that could be employed with the singular, aggressive focus of a breaching tool. He was no longer just suppressing the enemy, he was hunting them, moving faster than their defensive network could communicate and react. The bunker that had anchored the Japanese defenses on the hill, the central node from which the other positions drew their strength, contained 12 enemy soldiers and enough ammunition to sustain defensive fire for hours. Watson's approach eliminated that position in less than 30 seconds of sustained automatic fire. The BAR's devastating close-range effectiveness proved overwhelming against defenders who had prepared for grenades, flamethrowers, and rifle fire, not for a single man charging their position while unleashing a continuous stream of 30-06 rounds. The psychological effect was absolute. He wasn't just clearing a bunker. He was collapsing the enemy's entire tactical and mental framework. The Japanese soldiers, trained to fight to the last man from interconnected positions, found their connections severed. Their support positions were not suppressing the American. They were being suppressed by him. The hunter had become the prey. When silence finally returned to the hilltop, it was a heavy, deafening vacuum. Watson found himself surrounded by the results of 15 minutes that had redefined what one Marine with the right weapon could accomplish against impossible odds. The ammunition count told its own story. He had fired 160 rounds, 8 full magazines. This was the mathematics of firepower that Doctrine had failed to grasp. It was not 160 bullets for 160 men. It was 160 rounds to create a cone of suppression so total, so terrifying, that it neutralized an entire company's will to fight. He had left himself with only 80 rounds, 4 magazines, for whatever came next. But the tactical landscape had changed completely. Japanese positions that had seemed impregnable minutes earlier lay silent. Their defenders were either dead or had withdrawn deep into the tunnel systems that no longer provided the sanctuary they had once offered. The too heavy gun, the doctrinal misfit, had proven that mobility and firepower, when combined with impossible aggression, could overcome any defensive position that depended on conventional tactical assumptions. In 15 minutes, Wilson Watson had single-handedly broken the back of an enemy company. But the battle for the hilltop, and for his life, was only just beginning. The bullet that found Watson struck him in the left shoulder at 12:21. It was not a stray round from the chaos. It was a single, deliberate, 7.7 millimeters shot from a Japanese sniper who had been watching the hilltop through a scope for the better part of an hour. This was the enemy's adaptation. They had seen the one-man assault, analyzed his mobility, and deployed their own precision weapon to neutralize it. The impact spun Watson around and dropped him behind a cluster of volcanic rocks that had provided his last firing position. Blood soaked through his utility jacket, warm and immediate against skin that had grown cold from shock and adrenaline. For 30 seconds, the only sounds on the hill were his own labored breathing and the distant, unconnected crack of rifle fire from other parts of the battlefield. The sniper's bullet, by all rights, should have ended Watson's fight, but it had struck at an angle. A fractional miracle in a day of brutal physics. It had torn through muscle and sinew without shattering the bone or severing major arteries. Watson discovered this not through medical training, but through a cold, dispassionate inventory of his own failing machinery. He could still move his arm, though each motion sent a jolt of white-hot lightning through his nervous system. More importantly, he could still operate the BAR's controls, even if reloading would now require a desperate, 1.5-handed adaptation. The weapon itself, a testament to John Browning's robust design, had survived the fall, undamaged. Japanese voices echoed from positions down the slope. Their tones had changed. The earlier confidence of a routine mopping-up operation was gone, replaced by the careful, professional discussion of soldiers coordinating an assault. They had witnessed Watson's 15-minute rampage and understood they faced an exceptional opponent. But they also knew that wounded men have limitations. The sniper had done his job perfectly by wounding rather than killing. A dead Marine is a problem solved. A wounded Marine is a tactical opportunity, a fixed point on a map, a target that can be suppressed, flanked, and overwhelmed. The Japanese were now shifting their tactics to exploit this new reality. Watson's ammunition situation had become critical in a way that extended far beyond simple round counts. He possessed exactly 60 cartridges across 3 magazines. This was the bill for his earlier success. His previous rate of consumption, the very thing that had granted him victory, was a tactical debt that was now due. 60 rounds represented perhaps 3 minutes of combat at his previous rate of fire. But more significantly, his wounded shoulder would prevent the rapid, fluid magazine changes that sustained automatic fire demanded. Each reload, he calculated, would now take 15 to 20 seconds, not the 8 he had managed when unwounded. In a close-range firefight against multiple opponents, those additional seconds were not a delay, they were a death sentence. The tactical problem facing Watson was unlike anything covered in Marine Corps training manuals. Doctrine assumed wounded personnel would be evacuated or would establish a final defensive position. Neither option existed. Evacuation was impossible, and a defensive position implies mutual support from other Marines who were themselves scattered and fighting for their own lives. Watson faced the choice between a near-impossible retreat and continued aggression, with either option carrying nearly certain fatal consequences. The decision was made for him. Japanese infantry began moving up the slope in coordinated bounds, no longer a piecemeal reaction but a platoon-strength assault designed to overwhelm his position through concentrated fire and maneuver. He counted at least 20 soldiers in the initial wave, with more following. They moved with the disciplined patience of troops who understood that time, and mathematics favored their cause. Watson's response violated every principle of defensive warfare. Instead of seeking the deepest cover and attempting to conserve his precious 60 rounds, he moved toward the advancing enemy. He fired controlled bursts that forced them to ground. His wounded shoulder created an awkward, braced firing stance. In a final, brutal irony, this physical limitation actually improved his accuracy, limiting his tendency to spray rounds and forcing a more deliberate trigger pull. Each 2 or 3 round burst was now more carefully aimed than his previous automatic fire, with devastating results against enemy soldiers who had not expected aggressive action from a wounded, cornered opponent. The Japanese assault faltered within minutes. Soldiers trained for conventional tactics found themselves facing an enemy who refused to behave according to established patterns. Their doctrine called for suppressing a fixed position, but Watson's position changed constantly. More critically, his precise, automatic fire was creating casualty rates that exceeded what their tactical planning had anticipated. The wound had become a tactical advantage. The pain forced him to move more deliberately. His reduced physical capacity required a new, brutal efficiency, leading to shot placement that was actually more effective than his previous, sustained, wasteful bursts. The limitation had become a liberation. The second wound came at 12:38. Not from a bullet, but from the concussion and shrapnel of a Type 91 hand grenade. The explosion, intended to flush him from cover, instead provided a new, terrible opportunity. A fragment opened a deep gash along his left leg. Watson used this. He understood the enemy was now hunting a wounded man, and he used his own blood trail, visible on the dark volcanic rock, as a tool of deception. He would fire from one location, drag himself to another, and wait for the inevitable return fire to strike the empty position he had just left. The Japanese, believing they were closing a net on a stationary, bleeding-out target, repeatedly fell into the trap. Their tactical doctrine, so effective against a conventional force, was being dismantled by a single, wounded Marine who had inverted every rule. Japanese casualties mounted with a speed that defied military logic. Watson's accurate, economical bursts had eliminated at least 15 more enemy soldiers, shredding their numerical advantage and inflicting a severe psychological toll. The Japanese commander, who had planned a methodical reduction of an isolated position, found himself committing his reserves. Then, his reserves, just to maintain momentum. The operation had transformed from a simple mop-up into a desperate, escalating struggle for control of a strategically worthless piece of rock. A struggle now defined by the need to eliminate the one American who had halted an entire company. The critical moment arrived. Watson's hand found his last magazine. 20 rounds. 20 triggers pulls left between him and annihilation. This was the final currency. Those 20 rounds represented the culmination of everything he had learned. The power of aggressive mobility, the stability of the weapon's weight, and the brutal effectiveness of automatic fire when applied with the precision of a sniper. The Japanese commander's final assault was an act of desperation. He committed every available soldier. Watson counted 37 inches. A simultaneous attack from multiple directions. It was a textbook maneuver to overwhelm a single, fixed, strong point. But Watson was not fixed. His last stand lasted exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. He was no longer fighting like a rifleman, but like a phantom, moving constantly, bracing his shattered shoulder against the rock. He used his wound-enforced economy of motion to devastating effect. Each burst was a single, 2-round stab. A target appears. Thump, thump. The target vanishes. He moves. A machine gun team sets up. Thump, thump, thump. The team is gone. He moves again. When his final round was expended at 12:44, the hilltop held only an impossible, profound silence, punctuated by the groans of the dying. The stretcher bearers who reached him at 14:35 found him conscious, but barely coherent. His body a map of wounds that should have killed him hours earlier. The battlefield assessment conducted later by advancing Marine units would tell the story his Medal of Honor citation could only hint at. 60 confirmed Japanese casualties in the immediate area. An entire company of experienced infantry, broken by one man. Lieutenant Colonel Denig, arriving at the aid station, was confronted with field reports that bordered on fantasy. The physical evidence, however, was irrefutable. The Browning automatic rifle lay where Watson had dropped it. Ordnance specialists who examined the weapon, expecting a melted barrel or a failed action, found it mechanically perfect. The too-heavy gun, built with the over-engineered precision of a bygone industrial era, had absorbed a level of sustained combat that modern, lighter weapons could never have endured. But it was the ammunition analysis that sent a shockwave through Marine Corps headquarters. Watson had fired approximately 200 rounds, nearly 90% of his total load, in a series of engagements lasting under an hour. By conventional standards, this was not just irresponsible, it was tactical insanity. Yet, the results were undeniable. Captain Morrison's after-action report, filed on March 2nd, was a quiet revolution. It recommended fundamental changes in how automatic weapons were employed, shifting from static, suppressive fire to aggressive, close assault tactics. Watson had, by necessity, proven that in the brutal, close-quarters reality of the Pacific, firepower and mobility were not trade-offs. They were the same thing. His wounds, a final irony, had forced a tactical adaptation, deliberate, precise bursts that actually improved his effectiveness. The war would continue without him, but his contribution would influence how it was fought. The BAR's reputation was rewritten in blood. On Hill 203, units began employing it with the aggressive spirit Watson had demonstrated, and ammunition allocations were increased to reflect the new, brutal mathematics of victory. The final, tragic irony lay in the timing. By 1945, military planners had already begun phasing out the BAR for lighter weapons. Watson had proven the weapon's ultimate effectiveness at the exact moment the military establishment had decided it was obsolete, leaving future generations to rediscover the tactical principles one wounded Marine had learned through desperate necessity on a volcanic hilltop in the Pacific.